Yeah, this is proper competitive football that you end up testing yourself against the best nations. That's why it's important, for no other reason than that. You don't play anyone of any significance, ever, until you get to a World Cup. By which time, the last time you played a decent team was two and a half years ago.
I personally think England should be rubbing shoulders with top teams. It doesn't really serve a great deal of purpose playing the likes of Finland and the Republic of Ireland.
And I think what we've seen is that maybe Carsley is ready for the senior level at this stage. I think some of the moments politically, for example, I think he made a few missteps. But what we do know about him is he's an incredibly good developer of talent.
But this was the camp where Jude Bellingham took control. As Harry Kane was sort of on the fringes against Greece, there he was, chest puffed out. I thought he looked like the captain of the team over the last two games.
He's one of those personalities where you can either shy away from it and see it as a bit of an issue, or you can embrace it and you can build the team around him. He is a generational talent, and I think Thomas Tuchel has the personality to tap into that.
I do think Kane will be a big feature for England going forward. I know people are lining up to write his career obituary in terms of England, but I still think he's got a lot to give.
Hello and welcome to Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook, and international football expert Kevin Hatchard. 8 debutants, 32 players, 16 goals. Lee Carsley's run as interim boss of England is over. But what does it mean? Let's get into it. England thrashed the Republic of Ireland 5-0. One word to sum up the Carsley era.
Successful. Absolutely.
Okay.
Because, yeah, do you want... No, just successful. I'll leave it at that.
Just leave it there. We'll come to it in just a second. Let's see if sexy Ruben Amorim can come up with one word to describe Lee Carsley's reign as England boss.
I think challenging.
Okay, that's good. All right. Okay, we'll get into that. We're going to speak about Lee Carsley, what he has done over the course of the last 3 months, what England have done by winning their group, what we've learned about some of the new players as well, plus looking ahead to what is going to be a busy week in the Premier League. Did someone say they're doing another vote in that Premier League boardroom? I know, you can't wait for the latest on that. Right, let's get into it. So England earn Nations League promotion thanks to a 5-0 thrashing over the Republic of Ireland. And Kevin, I don't think many people saw 5-0 coming at half-time, but it changed on one thing and one thing alone, didn't it? Harry Kane, back to goal, spinning, turning, playing a missile of a ball through to Jude Bellingham.
And this is what he's capable of, Sam. You know, he's got that ability to drop in. He is a creative player. We know that. The quality of that pass is outrageous. You know, even to have the idea of finding that angle and then to have the quality to do it is remarkable. It's one of the reasons Thomas Tuchel is such a big fan, and I do think Kane will be a big feature for England going forward. I know people are lining up to write his career obituary in terms of England, but I still think he's got a lot to give. But you have to be aware of the fact he's not that mobile. You know, has he ever been hugely mobile? But we know he's an incredible finisher. We know he has incredible pictures of what's around him. And that kind of moment breaks open a game. And from that moment on, once the penalty went in, Ireland collapsed completely and England took full advantage.
Are people really queuing up to write his obituary as an international footballer? Or are they just looking at the alternatives? Because one of the things that we've learned over the course of the last 3 months is that there are alternatives, and competition, healthy competition, is good.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the problems I've got with Harry Kane, and it's partly his own fault, is that he wants to play every game. Now, while that is a positive, that there are games, if you're Harry Kane at international level, that you can afford to sit out and rest up and give somebody else an opportunity. We know he doesn't want to do that, and I think that's probably part of the reason he gave that explosive interview to your ITV colleagues before the first game in this break. I think he knew by that stage that he wasn't going to start the game, and that's why his comments about people who hadn't reported for duty came, because he had reported when maybe he wasn't fully fit, and then he found out he wasn't in the team, and I think that frustrated him. But we do need to use him sparingly. I'd suggest that he still has a role to play in the biggest of games, but does he really need to play against Latvia at Wembley if that's a World Cup qualifier? Probably not. Give Dominic Solanke or Ollie Watkins an opportunity.
Yeah, interesting. I don't actually think he did know when he sat down and did that interview really early in the week, actually last week, that he wasn't going to be in the team. I think everybody anticipated that he would be. And maybe that's sort of half the problem in a way, that it's almost taken for granted that he is going to play. And that's the point that Lee Carsley was trying to make. Actually, we need to open this up. We need to expose players to games of greater significance, so that actually when the time comes and we do need to utilise the squad and realise its depth, then we can do so without fear, because they've been through some of the process before. And that, I think if you look back over the 3 months of his period in charge, Kevin, has to be the expansion of the playing pool, the number of players that have come in and got their debuts. Now, there will be some skeptics who say, well, he's just given a load of under-21s caps. Well, that's the idea, isn't it? That's the pathway being followed.
That pathway is critical. It's critical at club level, it's critical at international level, because you have to give young players the belief that they can impress, they can develop, they can move up a level. And what it also does, and it goes back to your point about Harry Kane, is he puts pressure on the guys a level up. Because if they're looking around saying, right, if I don't hit my level time and time again, I'm going to be replaced here, you know, that is really healthy. And it means that Thomas Tuchel has a huge pool to pick from. That's important because he's shown time and time again as a club coach that he has very specific requirements, and when they don't get filled by transfers, he gets very annoyed. Now, at international level, you can't do that, but he should have enough tools in the toolkit, I think, to be able to create the system he wants, the fluidity he wants, because he won't necessarily be wedded to one formation. He's very pragmatic in that sense. And what he'll want is lots of different ways to attack a game. Carsley's helped him to do that. And I think what we've seen is that maybe Carsley isn't ready for the senior level at this stage. I think some of the moments politically, for example, I think he made a few missteps. But what we do know about him is he's an incredibly good developer of talent. And that's why in that under-21 role, he's perfectly suited.
Yeah, obviously by increasing the level of competition, there'll be a lot more scrutiny on who Thomas Tuchel ends up picking in March. And I wonder whether or not those explosive comments that Harry Kane came out with will all be under the carpet and filed away by the time we get to March, Crook, or whether or not one or two will be knocking on his door when they return to the squad to say, excuse me, do you mean me?
Well, I'd like to see the England WhatsApp group and, you know, how some of those players who didn't report for duty reacted to those comments. I think it was probably a little bit clumsy from Harry Kane because also, you know, you're throwing 8 or 9 players under the bus, aren't you? He didn't hone in on any one particular player. So everybody, therefore, who's pulled out of the squad is under suspicion. But I think it does show his dedication to England. He said, didn't he, in the interview, that playing for England is the most important thing in his career, which maybe hasn't always been the case. That was certainly something that Gareth Southgate harnessed, and I think the big disappointment with all these pullouts, and I do understand there was a lot of pressure applied by certain Premier League managers, is that maybe in just a matter of months since the European Championships, that desire, that commitment to the England cause has already begun to wilt. So that's job number one for Thomas Tuchel, I think, to tap into what Gareth Southgate laid in terms of foundations. But in the end, they've come through as group winners. Obviously, the Greek game at home was a major disappointment. Lee Carsley got his tactics hopelessly wrong and cost them there, but ultimately it didn't cost them their place back in the top flight. And I know you've got a very strong opinion on the importance of the Nations League. Some people don't see it as important. I personally think England should be rubbing shoulders with top teams. It doesn't really serve a great deal of purpose playing the likes of Finland and the Republic of Ireland, but it did enable Lee Carsley to give opportunity to those younger players. I thought Noni Madueke came out of the tournament with his reputation enhanced. I thought Tino Livramento was very good in the game on Sunday, and I liked your line about a goal made in Newcastle with him supplying the cross for Anthony Gordon. So there's plenty of positives, and even Taylor Harwood-Bellis, what a brilliant moment for him right at the end of the game. Fantastic header.
Yeah, it really was. It took me by surprise a little bit. I didn't expect him to be up there, but he did brilliantly. And it was one of those moments where poor old Roy didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because obviously it was the 5th goal against his country, which he wasn't hoping for. He was really didn't want them to be thrashed last night. It was something that he said repeatedly. But that it was his son-in-law or future son-in-law who ended up nodding his first goal on his debut, which was terrific for him and terrific for the family. Just on that sort of that Harry Kane situation, I think you're right about the clumsiness of the word choice. I mean, he is a very clever man, actually, and he didn't go into that interview not knowing what he was going to say. He understands. He is the England captain. He understands that whatever he says carries weight. So there was an underlying message there. Having spoken to him over the weekend, he was sort of suggesting actually that his view was not necessarily about the drift. And there was a little bit of a message there, I still think. I think he was still sort of saying, I don't want anyone to take this for granted. England is important and you've all got to be here. But I think it was a wider message as well. And I think he probably would have been better served homing in on this about the amount of games these players have to play. I suppose what that does, though, is tell you that you've got to utilise the squad, Kevin, whether you are club or country.
Yeah, I think this is coming up more and more, actually. You're getting international managers giving players time off, giving them kind of strategic breaks. In this Nations League campaign, we've seen Kevin De Bruyne given time off with Belgium. We've seen Kylian Mbappe left out of the France squad for the last couple of games. And the Nations League is important, I believe.
It is important. Because you have to test yourself against the very best.
Yeah.
You play World Cup qualifying or European qualifying. You don't play anyone of any significance ever until you get to a World Cup. By which time, the last time you played a decent team was two and a half years ago. This is proper competitive football that you end up testing yourself against the best nations. That's why it's important. For no other reason than that, I think.
All the way through, because at the top end, Sam, exactly what you're talking about. You have the opportunity to test yourself against the best so that it's not so much of a jarring shock when you get to a major tournament. Then you go further down, you look at like San Marino, Gibraltar. I know people say, well, they're minnows. What does it matter? It matters a huge amount to them. And it means actually that they're getting experience of winning. They're getting experience of promotion in some cases. And so all the way down, it's important. But because it's important, that's why it's a problem. Because actually it means you've got intense games all the way through. It used to be in these slots, you'd have friendlies where people wouldn't take it that seriously. You'd have 6 changes at half time. It'd be all over the place. But now, actually, you've got to be at it because it has a bearing on World Cup qualification, Euros qualification. These things are important. So given that, you have to be really careful about when you play players, when you give them a rest. But Kane's a great example of a player that simply does not want a rest. You have to strong-arm him onto the bench.
Interestingly, though, you mentioned about World Cup qualifying. I noticed that it's all going to be done and dusted by November, and for some people it isn't going to start until September, which shows you the folly of what we've been going through for the last 20 years, where World Cup qualifying has taken 18 months. It doesn't need to take that long. Right, okay, now the Nations League is there. Everyone's going, well, actually, we've got the Nations League, so we don't really need to sort of, bolster out this international football calendar. We can just use it as an opportunity to sort of actually play some competitive games. I think eventually it will settle down and work a lot better, the international football calendar. We've taken a lot of dates out of it already, by the way. We can't afford to take out any more. Go back and look at the highlights then of the time of... Lee Carsley, and pick out some of the players that have done really well. In particular, the players that have stood out for you, the younger players. Crook?
Well, as I say, I think Noni Madueke has done really well, and Livramento grasped his opportunity with both hands. I think Anthony Gordon, after a disappointing summer, when for me he was criminally underused by Gareth Southgate, I think he'll take a lot of positives out of the last 5 or 6 games as well. I guess one disappointment, and he didn't play in this squad, but he didn't cover himself in glory last time round, was Cole Palmer. I think we're still to see the best of him in an England shirt. I think Jarrod Bowen has done well at times. I mean, what a way to mark your introduction on Sunday, scoring with his first touch. And he is someone I think who can be utilised as an impact player, a finisher, coming off the England bench.
Yeah, I think he's an England player, isn't he, Kevin? Because he really loves playing for England. And he's got that energy that you sometimes need in an international football match, which is coming off the bench, effervescent, fizzing with the need, the desire to try and make something happen.
Yeah, and he's somebody that can hurt you in a lot of different ways because he's got that direct running. He's a beautiful striker of the football. He hits it so well. And I think he's quite consistent as well. He's a creative player, consistent goal scorer. I like him a lot. And when when people were putting down their top England 11. He might not be in it, but it's not always about that. It's actually about these guys that can come in. I think we're seeing this more and more in international football now. Come in and be real impact players. We're seeing it at club level, actually, as well, with 5 subs. So you've got that ability to change a game. I was really impressed with Curtis Jones. I thought the way he took his goal against Greece was, symptomatic of the kind of confidence he has right now. He's playing incredibly well under Arne Slot for Liverpool. And he's somebody that has real technique, but also has improved without the ball. And I think for Thomas Tuchel, that kind of thing is going to be really, really important. I'd echo Madueke as well. He's exactly my sort of player. Love wingers that will run at people, expose them one-on-one. I go back to the game against Liverpool recently that Chelsea played. Andy Robertson didn't want to go near him.
No.
So I think that's a really good sign. So, Bukayo Saka, nailed for that position, you'd think, but it's great to have competition for places, different ideas. It's really good. The amount of players they have, really good.
Yeah, it's obviously it means that some people are going to be disappointed when it comes to the next squad selection. Jones, I have to say, really impressed me. I thought he was absolutely terrific. I thought that Lewis Hall did brilliantly, bearing in mind that he is the youngest Newcastle player to play for England since 1904. We need a left back, and he's come in at half-time in a pivotal game and done a very good job. He then did well, I think, against Republic of Ireland. It wasn't without fault, but, he didn't look out of place. And I thought, you've got a left back, someone who's playing for one of the biggest teams in the country. You've got to utilise this kid. So he's given him his head, and that's another big plus for Thomas Tuchel going forward. We've mentioned Anthony Gordon. I thought he did well. Morgan Rogers was great. Morgan Gibbs-White coming off the bench and running at defenders is great. I must say, Conor Gallagher needs a massive mention, because we talk so much about not having the right midfielders, especially in the European Championship. We can't get the blend in midfield right. We can't do this, we can't do that. We've got Angel Gomez who can keep the ball all day long and keep it ticking over everywhere now. You've got Curtis Jones who can do both sides, so he can get forward and he can get back and help out off the ball. I don't think there's many better than Conor Gallagher in terms of engine, getting up and down the pitch, and playing for Simeone, playing in La Liga every week, I think will enhance his ability on the ball as well. So, there is that sort of extra ballast in that midfield area. But this was the camp where Jude Bellingham took control. This became Jude's team over the course of the last 7 or 8 days, I think. As Harry Kane was sort of on the fringes against Greece, there he was, chest puffed out. I thought he looked like the captain of the team over the last 2 games, which I think has got to be a good thing going forward, Alex.
Yeah, because I think he's one of those personalities where you can either, as a manager, you can shy away from it and see it as a bit of an issue, as I think maybe it was for Gareth Southgate in the summer, or you can embrace it and you can make him a leader and you can give him the captain's armband and you can build the team around him. He is a generational talent. And I think Thomas Tuchel has the personality to tap into that. And I think you're right with Harry Kane on the bench. I think Jude Bellingham did see it as the opportunity to step up and prove he can be that leader. And not just with the way that he performs. I think, with the way that he takes ownership of the pitch, doesn't he? He's got an incredible self-confidence, bordering on arrogance. But as I say, I think Thomas Tuchel will embrace that.
There was lots of statistics doing the rounds about the first time that England have had 4 new players score their first goal for England in a very long time. Obviously, it's the first time they've ever beaten the Republic of Ireland 3 times in a row. It's the biggest defeat by England for the Republic of Ireland, and their biggest loss since being spanked by Germany 6-1 at home in 2012. I think Ireland had a reasonable Nations League up until they came to Wembley, and Liam Scowes lost his head a little bit. But it was interesting that, Kev, that decision to send him off, was sort of typical of what we saw this week with the referees in this competition around Europe. They were very card happy.
Yeah, some really strange decisions. I thought the decision to send Sucic off in the Croatia game away to Scotland, I thought was really harsh. I thought that was and that killed the game for Croatia, really. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a bit more later. But yeah, I thought there was some really, really strange decisions, actually. Some penalties that were given that I thought were quite harsh. I think with the Republic of Ireland, I think the concern would be the way that they did collapse. And I think actually, even though they beat Finland in the previous game,
They weren't very good.
Finland are not a great team, and they hit the post twice, and actually were right in that game. And Kelleher had to play really well. So I think that's a concern. I think the confidence is still very brittle, and Hal Grimson kind of alluded to that afterwards. I think he's got a lot of work to do. He's got a lot of raw talent there. There's some real quality. Ferguson I like very much. I think he's a terrific young player.
Johnston.
They've got some real quality. There's no doubt about it. But he's got to find that balance. And he's got to find a way of stopping them from collapsing when they concede goals, because they're too easy to play against at the moment. That's the big problem.
What are you going to do about the boy Kelleher, Kev? You're a big Liverpool fan. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? He's too good. You can't just keep sitting him on the bench all the time. And now they've signed Marmadashvili. Someone's going to get a good goalkeeper here, aren't they?
It's the definition of luxury, because the only concern is Alisson's injuries that have kind of piled up. So again, you've got to be a little bit careful, but goalkeepers don't like being rotated. And Kelleher's been quite clear about this for quite a long time now. I don't want to be a number 2. I want to be a top goalkeeper for somebody. And I think he's got enormous potential. I think he will get better. I still think occasionally he makes odd decisions, but that's going to come with rhythm, with time, with games. But he has enormous potential. He's a terrific goalkeeper.
Okay, well, England is done until March. The best place to follow it will be on talkSPORT. Lots to get through later on, including a little bit of a word from the boardrooms of some Premier League clubs after Manchester City wrote to everybody once again. We'll deal with that very shortly. And we'll bring you some of the other action from across Europe. Now, before we touch on some of the other action, there were some big victories for the likes of Germany over the course of the week, but there was some really odd turn of events in the game between the Netherlands and Hungary on Saturday night. Their assistant coach, Adam Shalai, collapsed after just 7 minutes. Now, he's in a stable condition, which is good, and we wish him all the best. Now, apparently, Dominic Szoboszlai has been saying, Kevin, that this has happened before. It was a seizure, I think. But obviously, during the course of a football match, and the assistant coach is standing on the sidelines 1 minute, the next minute he'd collapsed on the sidelines and was sort of going through some sort of visible seizure. That must have been quite harrowing, not only for him, but for the people around him as well.
Yeah, horrible moment, because, you're trying to focus on a game and then something horrendous happens like that to somebody that is effectively a teammate of yours, if you like, part of the coaching staff, but a recent teammate of a lot of those players, was a really good striker. And how do you focus on football after that? And I think they did have the option of stopping the game, but they came together, they talked about it, and they decided to carry on, and they lost the game heavily in the end. But, it did show real fortitude to actually carry on with that game. I think there was an awareness fairly early on that he was in a stable condition. So I think that obviously fed into that decision. But yeah, a horrible moment for all concerned. And we wish him the speediest of recoveries.
Yeah, I'm not sure I like the debate around the Wout Weghorst celebration, because Weghorst obviously had scored. He then did a knee slide and celebrated. Some criticised him for over-celebrating. But I thought, he's in the moment. Once you've said to a professional athlete, this game is continuing, he's concentrating on being a professional athlete and being in the game. I think it was a bit sort of, I don't think you need to get involved with that. There was another big incident that happened, and Piotr Zielinski, did you see this, Crook? You would love this. This is right up your street, right? He's an international footballer. He's playing in a game against Portugal. He plays for Poland, and they get absolutely battered. But afterwards, he goes up to Cristiano Ronaldo and says, "Can I have a selfie?"
Oh wow!
And has a selfie, right? And this is in the tunnel after the game, or wherever, just in the sort of communal areas after the game. Now, some people going mad about this. Like some ex-Polish footballers are going absolutely crackers. But Crook, I think you'd be all over that.
No, I don't think I would. I think I would be absolutely raging.
You wait outside Old Trafford. You love a little bit of a selfie with a famous footballer. You do.
Not after I've been battered by one of them. I can see why that hasn't gone down well in Poland. I think that lacks a little bit of awareness. This isn't a great Polish side, is it? By the way, it hasn't been for some time now. So I think if an England player did that after a significant defeat, I think there would be uproar in this country, and I think rightly so. I disagree with you a little bit about the Weghorst thing as well. I think he could have dumbed down the celebration in the circumstances.
Okay. Germany 7, Bosnia Herzegovina 0. Germany had already secured themselves a place in the quarterfinals before this game. However, there was no holding back. They became the first team in the competition's 6-year history to score 7 in a single game. So much for like-minded and equal teams playing against each other, Kev.
Yeah, they absolutely battered them. And Jamal Musiala keeps scoring headers. It's very strange. He scored about 4 or 5 headers in the last few weeks. So
he's smaller than me.
He's obviously improved that part of the game. He should score more, really. So that's overdue, maybe, that he's getting a few goals in the air. Florian Wirtz's got a couple of goals, including a brilliant free kick. But they found a striker, and it doesn't bode well for Niklas Füllkrug, I don't think, because Tim Kleindienst, who's a guy that was at Heidenheim last season, Gladbach this season, scoring goals in the league, but scoring goals for Germany, poacher, but also strong in the air, the kind of focal point they want. And when you've got him scoring goals, Havertz in behind him, Wirtz and Musiala out wide, that's pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, looks ominous for Julian Nagelsmann, who's taking the team until 2026. It'll be Nagelsmann against Tuchel in the final. I'm sure of it. Scotland 1, Croatia 0. Scotland beat 10-man Croatia with a late effort from John McGinn, who came off the bench. Scored a goal in 86 minutes, played against 10 men for a very long time in that game. Scotland's 10-game run without a win. It gives them a great chance, actually, of avoiding automatic relegation. Now, by the time you see this or hear this, it might be that the Scotland game is already done, so we don't know the result against Poland. But Crook has already told you that Poland are not a very good team, so he's probably going to tell you the score now. You know what he's like, Nostradamus. He tells you these, he sits on the podcast, he tells you what's going to happen next. So what is going to happen next, Crook?
Actually, the 2 or 3 times I've done that, I've been spot on.
Have you?
They can go there and win. I think they can go there and win. I'm going to go for a Scotland victory. I think they've had a decent Nations League campaign, actually. You know, considering the level of opponent they're against. Yes, no wins in 10 doesn't look great on paper, but you have to factor in who they've played, and they've been competitive, haven't they, in every game? And I think that'll do Steve Clarke the world of good, that victory over Croatia.
Turkey 0, Wales 0 was a game of frustration, missed chances from both teams. Look, the penalty save was terrific. The miss was terrifically bad from Kerim Artikoglu. The result, however, does mean that the Welsh hopes of promotion to the top tier of the Nation League are still alive-ish for now. You know, they've got work to do, but they've certainly got the opportunity to get up, which is good for them. Imagine if we have Scotland, Wales, and England all in the top tier of the Nations League. That'll be fun, won't it? Right, the 19 Premier League clubs who aren't Manchester City have got a big decision to make this week about whether they vote through a new set of financial rules. Well, not rules, amendments, because basically, unless they ratify the new APTDs, whatever they're called, Associated Party Transaction Rules, then the PSR rules mean absolutely nothing, and it will mean that the sort of Premier League has no financial governance, Crook. So Manchester City want everybody just to vote them down. Of course they do. What's going to happen?
Well, I think you're going to get the usual split that we get now with the big decisions. I spoke to a senior figure at a Premier League club probably about a year ago now, and he described these meetings as like the Wild West, because you've got certain groups who stick together, certain groups who rally against everything the rival groups are proposing, and it's a little bit of a mess. I think for me, the most worrying line in this letter that the BBC have put up on their website is that City said their strong desire is to avoid any future legal disputes, saying it's critical the Premier League gets it right this time. Basically, that City saying, if we don't agree with these rules, we're going to sue you.
Yes, and we've got more money, and whereas you're getting all very nervous about the fact that all of the legal costs so far are coming out of the central broadcast pot, we know that legal costs don't go on to PSR, and we've got more money than anyone, so we'll just keep suing, which is not a great situation to be in. They need 14 people to change the rules, right? To amend the rules, to do anything actually, you know, to order tea and put it on expenses. If it's not already in the rule book, they need 14 people to put their hands up and vote for it. As Crook said, though, no one likes each other at this moment. So it's like 20 different people with competing agendas sitting around the table and going, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Which means that not much gets through. So they only actually need, 6 other people to vote with them, Kevin, in order to sort of kibosh these deals. And then we are in a situation where nobody can be penalised for PSR because basically you can just print your own money and pump it in if you want to.
Yeah, and I think that's a concern. And I've talked for a long time about my concerns about state ownership and what effectively is state ownership, and the fact that it does distort the market, it distorts the competition. And it also is very, very difficult when you have this kind of dispute. If you're suddenly, instead of you're going up against a football club, if you're basically going up against a country, how do you then, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, aren't you? A lot of the time, it's really, really difficult to kind of push that through. So I think there are big concerns here. I think football has to get a grip of this in general. I think it's been far too laissez-faire about who owns clubs, the power that they wield. We've seen already with Newcastle, for example, what is the separation between the PIF and the state effectively. There's been lots of talk about that, lots of conflicting testimony in that regard. I think it's something that the football authorities have been far too lenient with, and I think now, the chickens are coming home to roost. I think it's something they need to get a grip of, and it's probably too late.
Well, the FA, the Premier League, they've all allowed it to slowly drift, their power to slowly drift. I mean, the FA at one time were completely in control of every aspect of the game. They were all, at one stage, they stopped anyone from earning more than £200 a week, or there was a maximum wage imposed many, many years ago. I'm not saying that we should be back there, but they were completely in control of absolutely everything. Slowly but surely, their control of the game has been eradicated, and their ability to regulate the game has been eradicated as well. They ceded too much control to the Premier League, who then ceded too much control to those richer members that are in their group. And now we've got a situation where we had the institutions running the game. Now the clubs are very much running the game. And I think we're going to get into a situation, if we're not careful, where we end up killing what is great about the Premier League because we're not controlling the collective. We're only controlling the small bits of land grabbing we can do because the rules aren't written correctly. Anyway, that is a problem, and it will unfold, I'm sure, this week, and it will be a big story by the time we get to the weekend. The weekend's football returns. Finally, I just want to say something positive about what it's like going to watch football in this country. When you go to a game in this country, you are pretty much looked after as an away fan when you get to the ground. Now, look, you might not all have great experiences, and there might be instances and isolated ones over a course of a season where you can complain about what a club didn't do for you. I look at Brighton and I think about them putting on a local beer from your hometown that ends up in your away end when you get there, and they change the sort of lighting and make you feel really comfortable about being in their stadium because they want you, A, to respect it, but 2, they want you to have a good time because they see you as useful consumers that will spend a lot of money and therefore help the betterment of their club. That's how I think we've got to see away fans in this country. What happened in Athens on Thursday night was nothing short of a disgrace. England fans have had their busiest year, their second busiest year of all time. Largely, I'd say it was their busiest year because the previous one was 2021, when there was some still restrictions about who could attend what games. They have travelled across Europe over the course of the last 12 months, and they have behaved largely absolutely impeccably. Go back to Germany and the way they were in Germany. They were terrific in Germany. They have followed the country, watching half the time, not great football, let's be honest. The performance in Greece was their best away performance for a very, very, very long time. But the fact that half of them ended up leaving early or didn't get in till late or didn't get in at all because they were being treated like second-class citizens by the Greek police, I thought was absolutely outrageous. If you were caught up in that, you know someone that was caught up in that, please write to the Football Supporters Association, the FSA. They're on all the usual social media outlets, and you can contact them quite easily. But we've got to somehow get to a situation where England fans aren't being targeted as basically sitting ducks when they go to football matches away from home in Europe. Kev?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. And I think there's a historic element to this in the sense of how England away fans are treated sometimes. I think that's absolutely the case. And I think you're right. I think there has to be more. We've seen some at club level. We've seen some horrendous experiences. We've seen Champions League finals, for example, that just haven't been properly planned, haven't been properly regulated. Fans have had awful experiences. And I do think there does need to be more joined up thinking. And I think...
But I think it's worse than that, Kev. I know there is joined up thinking. The FSA, the Football Supporters Association, send representatives of the Metropolitan Police to the football policing unit, to the venues that England are going to in the weeks leading up to it. They have meetings with the FA, the Greek FA, the local police. They do that. They do the joined up thinking. They say to them, if you put the game here, this will happen. Or can you think about putting our supporters here so it's easier for them to get in?
Yeah.
If you organise the transport in this way, there is a way of resolving these problems. And they get largely ignored.
Yeah.
How can that be?
Yeah, and what concerns me as well is we don't seem to learn from these things either. When you always hear, we'll take learnings from this report, or we'll take this going forward, and it never seems to improve. So I agree with you hugely. I think there's a lack of communication. I think as well, obviously I do a lot of work in Germany. There's a big thing in Germany at the moment about how the police treat visiting fans. That is a big problem, that they're being kind of treated as if they're troublemakers constantly, really heavy-handed tactics. We've seen that time and time again. So I just think, I do think fans get a raw deal sometimes. I think they get stigmatised in a way that isn't fair, and that's what feeds into some of this treatment, and it's outrageous.
Yeah, and also I'm fed up with UEFA because Crook contacted them during the course of the aftermath of that event in Athens, and all they said was, "It's nothing to do with us, Gov."
Yeah, I thought that was a really poor response. When I put to them the allegations that England fans had been tear gassed, and there've been so many eyewitness accounts now that we believe that to be true. And they said, well, if it didn't happen inside the stadium, it's a matter for the local authorities, and that shouldn't be the case. And I was just about to say, I think UEFA have serious questions to answer here. I was in Istanbul when City beat Inter Milan in the Champions League final. The travel arrangements for that game and access to the stadium was absolutely chaotic. And if City and Inter fans hadn't behaved impeccably, that could have led to a really dangerous situation. I was in Seville when Rangers were there for their Europa League final. They were brilliant, the Rangers fans, but again, they were treated really appallingly. I saw the police storm into a McDonald's for no particular reason and shut it down. The water was turned off inside the stadium on a really hot night in Seville, which led to some Rangers fans passing out, which again is obviously not a situation you want. And I've been with England at UEFA events, and it's a similar story. So I think UEFA have got a big problem here. We know about Liverpool and what happened to them in the Champions League final in Paris. So UEFA can't just wash their hands of this. Ultimately, they're not treating football fans with the respect they deserve. And in particular, I would suggest they're not treating British football fans with the respect they deserve.
Absolutely. And that is a big issue. Right. Okay. That's it from us. We're back on Thursday to give you all the rundown ahead of what is going to be a very busy return to domestic football. In fact, we've got an absolute plethora of live football when we come back from the international break. So get your rest in now, football folk, because it's about to go crazy on talkSPORT.